Amora was 8 years old when her life changed forever. Her father had died in a tragic accident, leaving her mother heartbroken and struggling to survive. A few months later, her mother also fell sick and passed away, leaving Amora with no one to call her own. The only family she had left was her mother's elder sister, Auntie Gloria, who lived in the city with her wealthy husband and 2 children. Everyone in the village believed Amora was lucky to have such a rich relative to care for her. But deep down, Amora already sensed that life with her aunt would never be the same. When Amora arrived at her aunt's mansion, she was amazed by its size and beauty. The house was painted white, with large glass windows, shining tiles, and a gate that towered high above her head. Expensive cars filled the compound, and gardeners trimmed flowers that looked too pretty to touch. Amora thought she had stepped into a dream, but the warm welcome she expected never came. Auntie Gloria only looked at her with cold eyes, and her cousins stared at her as though she was a stranger. The only smile she got was from Uncle Ben, her aunt's husband, but even his smile quickly faded when his wife frowned. From that day, Amora's life turned into a nightmare. She was no longer seen as family but treated like an unwanted burden. Auntie Gloria gave her old clothes that didn't fit, shoes with holes in them, and a tiny bed in the storeroom. She was told she had to earn her keep by working in the house like a servant. At first, Amora thought it was just for a short while, but soon she realized this was her new reality. Her little heart ached for the warmth of her mother, but all she found here was rejection and cruelty. Every morning, Amora woke up before sunrise to begin her chores. She swept the compound, washed plates, fetched water, and scrubbed the floor until her tiny hands hurt. While her cousins, Kyoma and Chike, enjoyed warm baths, delicious food, and a driver who took them to school, Amora was left behind to do laundry. She watched them laugh as they carried their shiny school bags, while her own dream of education slipped further away. Her aunt often reminded her, "You're here to work, not to enjoy." Those words cut Amora like a knife each time. Even meals were another form of punishment. While the family ate rice with chicken, fried plantain, or rich stews, Amora was given leftovers, sometimes cold or already going bad. If she dared complain, Auntie Gloria would slap her or call her ungrateful. At times, she even had to eat standing in the kitchen while her cousins sat at the dining table with golden plates. It was clear Amora wasn't considered part of the family. The neighbors sometimes noticed her tattered appearance, but they assumed she was a maid and said nothing. But the worst pain came at night. Alone in the small storeroom, Amora cried quietly into her thin pillow, remembering her mother's gentle voice. She often wondered why life was so unfair and whether God still saw her tears. Yet, deep inside her, there was a little spark of hope that refused to die. She believed her story could not end this way. She did not know how or when, but she was sure that one day, something would change. One Saturday morning, Amora was scrubbing the floor when she accidentally broke a glass cup. It slipped from her tired hands and shattered into pieces. Auntie Gloria stormed into the room like a raging storm. Without waiting for any explanation, she slapped Amora so hard that the little girl fell to the ground. "Stupid girl! Do you know how much that glass costs?" she screamed. Kyoma and Chike watched and giggled, enjoying the humiliation of their cousin. Amora tried to hold back her tears, but they rolled down uncontrollably. The punishment did not end there. Auntie Gloria ordered her to kneel on the hard marble floor with her hands raised for hours. Each time her hands dropped from weakness, she was beaten with a cane. Even Uncle Ben, who sometimes showed pity, kept quiet that day, afraid of his wife's anger. By the time Amora was finally allowed to stand, her knees were bruised and her body ached. She dragged herself back to the storeroom and cried until her eyes swelled. That day, she made a silent promise to herself: she would never remain a slave forever. Still, Amora kept working. Day after day, she suffered insults, beatings, and endless labor. Yet, she began to develop a strength that no one could see. Her young mind was sharp, and whenever she had a chance, she secretly read Kyoma's old textbooks. She dreamed of going to school, of wearing a uniform, and of one day escaping her aunt's cruelty. She did not know how long it would take, but she clung to her dreams like a lifeline. Fate, though hidden, was already preparing a plan that would shock everyone in the mansion. Years passed, and Amora grew from a fragile little girl into a young teenager, but her life in the mansion never improved. If anything, the suffering grew worse with age. As she became stronger, her aunt added heavier tasks to her list. She washed heaps of clothes by hand, cooked meals for the entire family, and sometimes even cleaned the cars while her cousins relaxed inside, drinking juice. Auntie Gloria always reminded her, "You are not one of us, never forget that." Those words sank deep into her heart like poison. Kioma and Chike, who were once playmates in the village before her parents' death, now treated her like trash. They mocked her ragged clothes, laughed at her cracked heels, and made her serve them like a servant. When visitors came, they would deliberately call her house girl so no one would suspect she was actually family. If Amora ever dared to defend herself, they would run to their mother and twist the story until she received a fresh beating. Amora had learned to suffer in silence, swallowing her pain with every insult. At night, when everyone else slept in their cozy bedrooms, Amora curled up on the cold floor of the storeroom. She had no mattress, only a worn blanket, yet her dreams burned bright. She imagined herself in a school uniform, writing in books, answering questions in class. Sometimes she whispered to herself, "One day, I'll be free." That hope was her only comfort, because in reality, her life was nothing but slavery within her own family. Amora's biggest nightmare came the day Uncle Ben revealed the darkness in his heart. He often passed by her when she worked in the kitchen, giving her strange looks that made her uncomfortable. At first, she ignored it, thinking she was imagining things. But one night, when Auntie Gloria had traveled for a burial and the children were asleep, he cornered Amora in the kitchen. His eyes were wild as he grabbed her arm and whispered, "Don't pretend you don't know what I want." Amora's heart pounded like a drum. She struggled and tried to escape, but he blocked her way. She begged, tears streaming down her face, saying she was like his own daughter. But he only laughed and pulled her closer. In that desperate moment, Amora found strength she didn't know she had. She pushed him with all her might, making him stumble, and then she ran into the storeroom, locking the door from inside. That night, she sat trembling, wondering how close she had come to losing everything. The next morning, Uncle Ben twisted the truth. He told Auntie Gloria that Amora had been trying to seduce him, wearing short clothes and looking at him in a strange way. Instead of protecting the girl, Auntie Gloria's eyes burned with rage. She shouted at Amora, called her shameless, and beat her until welts rose on her back. "How dare you try to destroy my home?" she screamed. Amora cried bitterly, but her words of innocence fell on deaf ears. From that day, her aunt's hatred grew even stronger. Life became unbearable after that incident. Auntie Gloria doubled Amora's chores, making her clean the house late into the night. Kioma and Chike mocked her more, calling her temptress whenever their mother was not around. Every meal she ate was monitored, every step she took was questioned, and every mistake was punished. Sometimes, Amora felt she was cursed, wondering if her life would ever have meaning. Yet, she held on to hope, whispering prayers in the darkness of her storeroom each night. But not everyone in the house hated her. Kioma, the younger daughter, quietly observed how unfairly Amora was treated. Unlike her brother and older sister, Kioma had a soft heart. Sometimes she sneaked food into the storeroom when Amora had been starved as punishment. Other times, she gave her old school notebooks and whispered, "Don't give up." For the first time, Amora felt a spark of kindness in that cold house. This secret friendship gave Amora strength to endure. She began reading in secret with the books Kioma gave her, using the little torch she had saved from the trash. She memorized pages, wrote on scraps of paper, and taught herself like a hidden student. Kioma encouraged her quietly, even though she was afraid of her mother finding out. That small bond was like light in the middle of Amora's darkness. She didn't know it yet, but this friendship would one day play a big role in changing her destiny. By the time Amora turned 16, her life had become a chain of endless suffering. She was no longer the small girl who arrived in her aunt's house years ago. She had grown tall and graceful, but her beauty only seemed to bring her more pain. Auntie Gloria often accused her of acting like a queen, just because she walked with confidence. Uncle Ben's eyes followed her in ways that made her skin crawl, and Amora lived in constant fear of being cornered again. Her cousins mocked her whenever they could, calling her slave girl in front of their friends. Still, Amora worked tirelessly from morning till night. She scrubbed the marble floors until her fingers bled, ironed piles of clothes, and cooked meals she was rarely allowed to taste. Sometimes, she would collapse from exhaustion, only to be woken by a slap or a harsh voice reminding her that she was lucky to have a roof over her head. The bitterness of her aunt's words cut deeper with each passing day, but Amora refused to let them kill her spirit. She clung to the small kindness she received from Kioma, her only source of comfort in that cold house. Deep inside, Amora carried a dream she never dared to share. She wanted to go to school, to study hard, and to one day build a life where she would no longer be treated like dirt. She wanted to be more than the maid her family saw her as. Each time she opened one of Kioma's old notebooks, she felt a fire burning inside her. She told herself over and over, "This is not the end of my story." Though life seemed dark, fate was slowly writing a different chapter for her future. One rainy evening, while Auntie Gloria was at a women's meeting, Amora was in the kitchen washing dishes. She froze when she heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Uncle Ben standing there, watching her. The fear she had buried for years rushed back all at once. He stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. "You think you can keep running from me? Tonight, you won't escape." His hand reached for her arm, and her heart began to race wildly. Amora panicked, but she remembered the promise she made to herself years ago, never to be a victim again. Gathering courage, she shoved the hot pot of soup she was carrying in his direction, spilling it on his clothes. He shouted in pain, giving her the chance to run. She locked herself in the storeroom, trembling but safe. Tears poured down her face as she realized how close she had been to losing everything once again. That night, she didn't sleep, fearing what would happen when Auntie Gloria returned. The following day, Uncle Ben spun another cruel lie. He claimed Amora had thrown the soup on him because he rejected her shameless advances. He insisted she was trying to destroy his marriage, and he needed her out of the house. Auntie Gloria's fury knew no bounds. She beat Amora until her body shook, then starved her for 2 days as punishment. From that moment, Amora's position in the house became even worse than before. She was watched closely, treated like filth, and reminded every day that she was unwanted. In the middle of all this pain, Kioma's kindness grew stronger. She was the only one who truly saw Amora's suffering. When her mother wasn't looking, she sneaked into the storeroom to bring food, pain balms, or even warm water for Amora's bruises. She would sit with her quietly and whisper, "Don't give up. One day, this will end." Those small acts of care were like medicine to Amora's wounded soul. Without Kioma, she would have broken long ago. Kioma also encouraged Amora to keep learning. She secretly shared her school notes and even showed her how to solve mathematics questions. "You're smart, Amora," she often said with a smile. "Smarter than me, even." Each word gave Amora strength to believe in herself again. She studied by candlelight whenever she had the chance, determined not to waste the little opportunity her cousin had given her. Though the world around her seemed against her, that one friendship reminded her that not all hearts were cruel. But their secret bond was dangerous. One evening, Auntie Gloria almost caught Kioma slipping food into Amora's room. To protect her, Kioma quickly lied and said she was throwing out leftovers. Amora knew the risk her cousin was taking and felt a deep gratitude she couldn't put into words. That night, she cried silently, not out of pain, but because she finally realized she wasn't completely alone in the world. Fate had planted a helper in the very house that tried to destroy her. Amora was now 18, no longer a little girl but a young woman with striking beauty. Her skin glowed even though she lived in suffering, and her eyes, though tired, carried a fire of quiet strength. Unfortunately, this beauty only attracted more cruelty. Auntie Gloria became more suspicious, constantly accusing her of trying to steal men's attention, even when Amora never left the compound. Every new insult was like salt rubbed into an open wound. Uncle Ben, though still dangerous, kept his distance after the hot soup incident. But his cold stares made Amora uncomfortable whenever they crossed paths. She avoided him as much as she could, slipping quietly through corners of the house just to keep away. Yet, Auntie Gloria treated her with even harsher punishment, using every mistake as a reason to beat her or deny her food. Sometimes, Amora wondered if her aunt hated her simply for existing. Her cousins were no better. Chike had grown arrogant, treating her like a slave he could order around. The eldest daughter, Ada, joined in, mocking her at every chance. Only Kioma remained a friend, but she was careful not to let her mother notice how much she cared. Amora endured in silence, her heart heavy but her mind refusing to break. Each night, she whispered to herself, "My story is not finished." One afternoon, Amora was sent to deliver a package to a neighbor's house. For the first time in months, she stepped outside the compound alone. As she walked, she noticed school children returning from class, their uniforms neat and their bags full of books. She paused, watching them laugh, and her heart ached. She imagined herself among them, raising her hand to answer questions. That moment reminded her why she must never give up. When she reached the neighbor's house, she met an elderly woman named Mama Esther. The woman looked kindly at her and asked, "Whose daughter are you?" Amora hesitated but quietly explained she lived with her aunt. Mama Esther's eyes softened as she studied the girl's tired face and bruised arms. She gave Amora some bread and water, insisting she sit down to rest. For the first time in years, Amora felt treated like a human being. Before she left, Mama Esther said something that stayed in her mind, "My child, no condition is permanent. Keep faith, and one day, your life will change." Amora carried those words back to the mansion like a hidden treasure. Each time she felt weak or hopeless, she repeated them to herself. It was a small glimpse of hope, but for Amora, it meant the world. Despite the hope she carried, Amora's life inside the mansion grew harder. Auntie Gloria had become crueler than ever, perhaps because she sensed Amora's quiet strength. She increased her workload. If Amora so much as coughed or slowed down, she would be accused of laziness. Even food became a weapon. Sometimes she went to bed with nothing but water in her stomach. One evening, Amora collapsed while scrubbing the bathroom floor. She lay there, weak and dizzy, unable to move. Instead of helping her, Auntie Gloria stood over her and hissed, "Useless girl, you want to die in my house? Stand up and finish the work." Her cousins laughed from the doorway, but Kioma rushed to her side, pretending to scold her while secretly helping her sit up. Amora's body was frail, but her spirit still refused to break. That night, lying weak in the storeroom, Amora realized she had reached her breaking point. She knew she couldn't continue like this forever. Something inside her whispered that change was near. She didn't know how, but she sensed fate was preparing to open a door, one that would finally lead her out of the prison she had lived in for so long. The pain was deep, but the fire in her heart burned brighter than ever. Amora's strength was fading, but her determination grew sharper. Every day in the mansion felt like a prison sentence, yet she refused to let her dreams die. She often stared through the window at the city beyond the gates, wondering what life was like outside. She imagined walking freely, without insults, without beatings, without fear. The thought gave her courage to keep going. She began to pray every night, asking God to show her a way out. One Sunday, Auntie Gloria forced her to follow them to church, not out of kindness, but so people would see her as a good guardian. Amora wore an old faded gown while her cousins dazzled in expensive lace. Yet, in that church, something unexpected happened. After service, as she walked alone outside, she noticed a young man staring at her curiously. He was tall, well-dressed, and clearly from a wealthy family. Amora quickly lowered her gaze, embarrassed by her appearance. She didn't know it then, but this young man's eyes followed her as she returned to her aunt's car. His name was David, the son of Chief Williams, a respected businessman in the city. Unlike others, David wasn't looking at her rags, he saw something deeper. That first glance was the beginning of a story Amora could never have imagined. The following week, fate worked strangely. Amora was sent by Auntie Gloria to deliver a parcel to the church office. As she walked across the compound, she heard someone call gently, "Excuse me." She turned, and there was David again. His smile was warm, and his eyes carried no mockery, only kindness. Amora froze, unsure if she should answer. She wasn't used to being spoken to politely, especially by someone of his status. David asked for her name, and she hesitated before whispering, "Amora." He repeated it softly, as though it meant something special. He asked if she was studying, and her eyes fell to the ground as she shook her head. For a moment, he seemed surprised, then concerned. "But you're young," he said. "You should be in school." Amora only smiled faintly, too afraid to explain her reality. Before leaving, he handed her a small notebook, saying, "For your thoughts." That simple gift lit up her heart. She clutched the notebook like treasure, hiding it in her storeroom, scribbling her dreams, her pain, and her secret prayers. It felt as though fate had given her a new friend, even if only from afar. She didn't understand why someone like David had noticed her, but deep inside, she felt that his appearance was not by accident. Auntie Gloria's cruelty only worsened, perhaps sensing that Amora was growing stronger in spirit. She shouted at her for the smallest mistakes, sometimes beating her until Kioma cried quietly in a corner. Amora bore it silently, but she had a new source of strength now, the memory of David's gentle voice and the notebook he gave her. Each time she wrote in it, she felt as if someone out there cared about her existence. One afternoon, Amora returned to the church compound for another errand. This time, David approached her again, offering her a bottle of water. He asked how she was, and though she wanted to say terrible, she only nodded and said, "I'm fine." David studied her carefully and seemed to sense there was more to her story. He didn't push her, but he told her, "Don't let anyone make you forget your worth. You're more than what you think." Those words struck her like lightning. For the first time in her life, someone outside Kioma had spoken to her as though she was valuable. Amora walked back to the mansion with her heart racing. She knew she had to be careful. If her aunt discovered she had spoken to David, the punishment would be severe. But deep down, a small flame of hope had been lit. She didn't know where this path would lead, but she believed it was the beginning of something that could finally change her story. Weeks passed after that brief encounter at church, but Amora couldn't stop thinking about David's words. She replayed them in her mind each night as she wrote in the notebook he had given her. Still, she didn't expect to see him again. Life in her aunt's house continued with the same cruelty, endless chores, insults, and beatings. But fate had other plans. One Saturday, Auntie Gloria sent Amora to the market with Kioma. As they struggled with heavy baskets, a black SUV pulled up nearby. To Amora's shock, David stepped out, helping his driver carry groceries. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Amora froze. David smiled warmly and walked over. "Amora, right?" he asked, remembering her name. Kioma looked surprised, but stayed quiet, pretending to adjust the basket. David offered to help them carry some of the load, but Amora panicked, afraid of what people would say if her aunt found out. She politely refused, but Kioma whispered, "It's okay, let him help." David walked with them a short distance, asking simple questions about how she was doing. Amora didn't say much, but the kindness in his tone gave her courage. That day, she realized fate truly had a way of reconnecting people. David's family lived in the same neighborhood as Auntie Gloria, though Amora had never noticed. His father was a respected businessman whose companies employed many people in the city. From then on, Amora would sometimes see David when she ran errands outside the mansion. He would greet her politely, sometimes slipping encouraging words that only she understood. Unlike others, he never mocked her ragged clothes or tired face. Instead, he treated her with respect that felt almost unreal. Kioma noticed the way David looked at Amora and teased her privately. "He likes you," she whispered one night when they were alone. Amora blushed deeply and shook her head. "That's impossible," she said. "Look at me. I'm nobody." But Kioma only smiled. "Sometimes life surprises us. Don't throw it away." Those words lingered in Amora's mind, even when she tried to push them aside. Amora tried to hide her growing connection with David, but secrets never stayed hidden for long in Auntie Gloria's house. One evening, Kioma mistakenly left a piece of paper from David's note lying on the floor. Ada, the eldest daughter, found it and showed it to her mother. Auntie Gloria's eyes flamed with suspicion. She stormed into the storeroom, holding the paper like evidence of a crime. "So this is what you've been doing? Seducing men now?" she screamed. Amora fell to her knees, begging and trying to explain, but Auntie Gloria refused to listen. She slapped her repeatedly, dragged her outside, and shouted at the top of her voice so neighbors could hear. "This useless girl wants to disgrace me. After everything I've done for her, She wants to bring shame into my house." The humiliation was unbearable. Amora wished the ground would open and swallow her. Uncle Ben smirked from a corner, clearly enjoying her pain. Chike and Ada mocked her, calling her shameless, but Kioma stood trembling, unable to defend her openly. That night, Amora was locked in the storeroom without food, tears soaking her pillow. Yet even in her pain, she whispered to herself in the darkness, "I deserve better. This is not the end." After the humiliation, Amora avoided going out for days. But whenever she had to run errands, she still saw David in the neighborhood. Soon, they began to meet secretly at the corner shop whenever Amora was sent outside. David never pressured her, he only asked about her dreams. She told him, in a trembling voice, how she wished she could go to school and one day become independent. Instead of laughing, David listened carefully. "You're brilliant," he said. "If you get a chance, you'll shine brighter than anyone." Amora's heart swelled with emotions she couldn't describe. But the secret friendship was dangerous. One day, Ada saw Amora smiling as she returned from the shop and suspected something. She whispered to her mother, who warned, "If I ever catch her with that boy again, she will regret being born." Fear gripped Amora, but at the same time, her hope grew. Trouble came sooner than Amora expected. One afternoon, Auntie Gloria received a phone call from a friend who claimed she saw Amora walking with David. Rage boiled inside her. When Amora returned from her errands, she was dragged into the sitting room, slapped, and accused of trying to trap a rich man to escape poverty. Her cousins laughed cruelly, but Kioma's eyes filled with tears as she watched. In the heat of anger, Auntie Gloria threw Amora's small box of rags into the compound and shouted, "Get out of my house! You will never disgrace me under my roof." Neighbors gathered at the gate, watching the shameful scene. Amora stood trembling, humiliated beyond words. She had no money, no family, and no place to go. For a moment, she thought her life had truly ended. But then, something unexpected happened. David's car pulled up just as the chaos unfolded. He stepped out, shocked to see Amora thrown into the street. Without hesitation, he walked up to her and said firmly, "She's coming with me." A gasp swept through the crowd. Auntie Gloria's face twisted with fury, but she was powerless to stop him. Fate had stepped in at last. David took Amora straight to his family home, where his mother, Mrs. Williams, welcomed her warmly. At first, Amora was terrified they would treat her like her aunt had. But Mrs. Williams gently held her hand and said, "Don't be afraid, my dear. Any child who suffers deserves a second chance." For the first time in years, Amora felt the warmth of a mother's love. Tears flowed down her face uncontrollably. David's family quickly realized how intelligent and determined Amora was. When she showed them the notebooks she had secretly studied with, they were astonished at her handwriting and knowledge. David's father, a man of few words, simply said, "This girl must go to school." Within weeks, Amora was enrolled in a private academy, given new clothes, and finally allowed to live like a human being. Her dreams were no longer whispers in the dark. They were coming true. Yet, adjusting to kindness was not easy. Many nights, Amora still woke up expecting to be beaten or starved. It took time for her to believe she was safe. But David and his family stood by her, slowly rebuilding the broken pieces of her soul. She began to smile again, a real smile that lit up her face. Years later, Amora walked across the stage of her university graduation in a shining gown, her head held high. In the audience, David's family clapped proudly, while Kioma, who had remained her true friend, beamed with joy. Amora's eyes filled with tears as she realized how far she had come, from a slave in her aunt's house to a woman educated and free. Fate had indeed rewritten her story. Auntie Gloria and her children heard of Amora's success, but it was too late for regret. They had lost the chance to treat her with love. Amora, however, carried no bitterness. She whispered a prayer for them, because she knew her rise was not by her strength alone, it was God's answer to her cries in the darkness. Beside her stood David, no longer just a friend but the man who had stood by her when no one else did. Their bond had grown into love, tested by trials but made stronger by trust. As they looked into each other's eyes, Amora knew she had finally found a home, not in walls of a mansion, but in the heart of someone who truly valued her. Her aunt had tried to destroy her, but fate had other plans, plans far greater than she could have imagined.